Hey everyone. Thanks for coming to Effective Giving. That's what the session will be. The session will start with a talk by Grace, and then we'll get into a Q&A with Grace and Luke. So if you have questions during the session, please put them in the talk card. I'll be able to read them out. Grace is the head of marketing at Giving What We Can. She's worked in marketing, digital product, and customer experience through various roles, including as a management consultant. Grace graduated with distinction from an applied Bachelor of Business with a major in marketing at RMIT University in Melbourne. Having always wanted to do good, Grace has immediately taken the ideas of effective giving and effective altruism that acclaimed her. She is working towards a flourishing future for all humans, and non-human animals where suffering no longer exists. Please welcome Grace.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. And we can all hear me still. Great, lovely. Okay, so yeah, this talk is going to go for about 25 minutes, and then we'll get into some Q&A after that. And today I'm going to be talking about how the future of effective altruism relies on effective giving. So to start off with, I wanted to start with why should we continue trying to spread the principles of effective altruism? It's been kind of a difficult year in the EA community, and many of us might have been wondering whether this project should continue. But for a relatively small movement in the broader scheme of philanthropy, and then even in the broader world of trying to make the world a better place, effective altruism and evidence-based philanthropy is really having a huge impact. The project of effective altruism really is doing a lot of good in the world. It's helping to find and support more high-impact work so that we can make faster progress on some of the world's most pressing problems. But before we go any further, I did want to acknowledge that there have been individuals and organizations practicing effective altruism decades before that term ever existed. And we're really lucky to be developing the ideas and the work of many people who've come before us that saw a need to effectively use our resources to help others. Today we're going to start by demonstrating a few case studies of the kinds of high impact work that the principles of effective altruism are having. So the first of these is the Humane League. I think the Humane League is a great example of an organization that is pursuing evidence and reason to achieve more impact. It was founded back in 2005 as just a small grassroots organization that was protesting foie gras at local restaurants in Philadelphia. As they grew, they widened their scope to all animals being raised for food. And in 2013, they launched the Humane League Labs, which conducted some of the first empirical studies on animal advocacy strategy and tactics. The Humane League is constantly striving towards effectiveness in its pursuits for a world without suffering for animals, and has now become more focused on corporate campaigns where there is evidence to suggest that this is an effective way to improve farm animal welfare. Their decision to keep refocusing on effectiveness has driven the Humane League to become one of the leading organizations improving animal welfare around the globe. So from local foie gras to global cage-free commitments through their Open Wing Alliance, we can really see how focusing on effectiveness has been able to generate more impact. And this is one of my favorite examples. This is the lead exposure elimination project, and I think it often gets talked about in the EA community as a great example because it is so wonderful. So the team at Charity Entrepreneurship identified that lead exposure in children was a massive global health problem. Globally, an estimated 1 in 3 children have elevated dangerous levels of lead in their bloodstream, which is truly unacceptable. And there is a simple solution to removing a lot of lead from the environment, which is just to regulate and remove lead from paint around the world. We know that about half of the countries in the world have regulations around lead paint, but that leaves almost half of countries that have no regulation around this. And we know that there are cost-effective alternatives to lead in paint, and that implementing policy changes is tractable. This charity is tackling a problem that affects millions of children every single year, has a clear pathway to improvement, and is severely neglected. Its potential for impact is enormous. And this is why I think LEAP is such a good example, because it really takes what we can achieve if we apply the principles of effective altruism from the ground up. But beyond specific charities doing amazing work, we've also started to create a more cultural shift and influenced others to take their profit-generating businesses and donate a lot of it. So here we can see, this is 3D Total. They're an educational publishing company, and they've now donated £1 million through their business to high-impact charities. We can also see here Western Pine Realty in Vancouver. They also are donating at least 10% of their profits, but they're also sharing about effective altruism and the principles with all of their clients that buy houses from them, whether their clients like it or not, I imagine. And we also know that there are at least 8,500 people who've committed to give a portion of their income for the rest of their lives, along with tens of thousands of donors around the world who are supporting effective charities. Our community is really creating a broader culture shift around effective philanthropy where impact comes first. And then if we zoom out from our own community, we're even having an impact on those who come from a more traditional stance on philanthropy. Charity Navigator is one of the central places in the US where people look up to find out what is a good charity or an efficient charity. And back in 2013, they were so opposed to the philosophy of effective altruism that in this op-ed, they called it defective altruism throughout their op-ed, which is pretty mean. But Charity Navigator actually more recently has been actually adopting impact metrics in its rating and acquired another organization that is closely aligned with effective altruism recently, which is really, really exciting. And we can see that last year they even published this article with an introduction to effective altruism on their website. So we can see that we're starting to really shift even some of our largest critics to really including impact in the conversation in philanthropy. So from my point of view, effective altruism really is doing a lot of good, and it's clear that these principles have an enormous impact and can continue to do so. So now that we've covered a few of those case studies, and hopefully we're all agreeing that effective altruism is something we should continue doing and it's great, I wanted to talk about how things have changed over the years. So early in EA, people were donating to highly leveraged funding opportunities, giving what we can, kind of started as a network of people trying to find these really highly effective charities to donate to. GiveWell was out there conducting some of its early research. So we had these 2 organizations, and I'm representing this through a scale of books. And then from there, the idea that we could use our careers to do good came to the forefront. And the idea that we could have smart and talented people having an even bigger impact with their talent as well as their money became incredibly influential. And then we even started our own high-impact charities and created an incubator to help those charities exist. People who were inspired by the principles of effective altruism went on to create organizations like Charity Science Health, which then went on to be Charity Entrepreneurship. And Charity Entrepreneurship, I'm not sure if everyone saw this, was recently called Hogwarts for Do-Gooders by author Rutger Bregman, which I thought was a really delightful way to phrase what their work does. And their work has gone on to produce incredible charities like the Lead Exposure Elimination Project, which I just talked about. And all of this progression has allowed the principles of effective altruism to reach millions more people and animals across many, many causes. So we've gone from supporting a small number of global health interventions to supporting a diverse community who is dedicated to looking for opportunities to do good in a variety of ways. But more recently, we've started to neglect the broad base of funding of these projects that we deemed really important. We started shifting a lot of our messaging towards careers, and while using your career to have a significant impact is wonderful, not everyone is interested in giving up their current career. Maybe they just really like what they want to do, or maybe they're not in a good position to do so. And we also saw some people who were likely engaging through giving before, shift their careers, and then stop donating. We also started to rely too heavily on a small number of funders, and this left projects being vulnerable to being shut down if even a single funder stopped supporting their work. We also started to alienate those who were looking to make a modest contribution. We heard from people in the community that felt like they didn't belong if they weren't all in, if they weren't giving up everything to be a part of the community, and decided not to participate. We also saw some people talking about a funding overhang, or that we were no longer funding constrained, which implied that funding couldn't be effectively absorbed. And here's why I struggled with that narrative. While there are 250,000 people each year that die from malaria, a disease that is relatively cheap and easy to prevent and treat, while 60 billion animals are raised only to be killed every year for food, while only a fraction of what would help us better prepare and prevent the next pandemic is being covered, and while hundreds of millions of people like Eunice live in extreme poverty, there cannot be a funding overhang. Billions of dollars could be effectively absorbed to make significant progress on these problems. It is abundantly clear to me that these effective projects need more funding. And this year, we have started to see some projects really struggle for funding, and now they're facing a tenuous future. There are still large funding gaps for many high-impact organisations, including GiveWell's top charities, a lot of the effective altruism meta work, including the Centre for Effective Altruism, Giving What We Can, and even orgs working on AI alignment, which was the centre of this previous funding overhang narrative. These funding gaps are taking time away from people who could be working directly on these problems, who now have to focus on funding. So less time is being spent on the core proposition. And most importantly, these funding gaps are meaning that highly leveraged work is not being done simply because there is not enough funding to go around. These projects are having to be shut down, discontinued, or are having to rethink or cut scope. And the reality is that high impact projects, whether they're non-profit, government, or even for-profit, cannot function without funding. And this year, I think it's worth noting that we have kind of had a particularly tough economic climate. So the cost of living has been increasing, the stock market's been all over the place, and so that has made things a little bit more difficult, as well as in Australia, we've seen a continuing decline in philanthropy and giving, which, as Andrew Lee noted last night, the Australian government is very keen to double by 2030. And I think for a lot of the reasons that I've talked about here, if we want high impact work done, we need to get it funded. And I think that this only makes it more important for us to remedy the situation. The fact that giving is declining, we should be really, really motivated to promote it even harder so that we can find ways to increase the funding and reduce the suffering that we really want to see in the world. And there is a path forward, excitingly. So I think that we really do have the capacity to increase funding within the community. We can start by making an individual choice to give more ourselves. We can advocate for giving within our network. We can work towards a global shift around effectiveness and giving. And in the next few slides, I'm going to quickly cover some practical actions that you can take to get more projects funded. Individually, we can choose to give. There's a lot of power in us giving. Starting with even a small donation across different high-impact causes can do an immense amount of good for beneficiaries. This approach also helps us nurture our authenticity as a persuasive advocate for impactful giving. When we give ourselves, it can help us inspire others to participate alongside us rather than us just kind of paying lip service to something that we don't really know about. We can also take a pledge, which is exactly what Giving What We Can promotes. But pledging to give can help us commit to a life full of giving and help us stick to our values. It reminds us to give regularly and helps us give in community and provide structure to help support us. And for those that might not want to take a pledge or might not think that it's suitable for them, I would encourage them to make a donation budget, which allows us to be more strategic about our giving. When we think about allotting a certain amount for our giving, it allows us to think, how are we going to get the most value out of this? How can we be the most effective with this money that we're giving away, rather than just being pulled by the appeals that we're hearing? And if we don't think that our individual contributions add up, I want to reiterate that a lot of high impact organisations could benefit from even just $50,000 to help close some of their funding gaps for the next year, which could really be like 5 to 10 people in this room giving like a significant but doable amount. Even these small amounts of funding really can go a long way to organisations that need it. Then thinking about our broader network. There are a variety of ways that we can promote effective giving to our networks. You could try your hand at fundraising. So you could organise or participate in fundraising events in your university, city groups, workplace groups, other professional groups, your EA groups. Whether it's a charity run, a poker night where you donate your winnings, or like launching a creative project. There are a lot of ways for us to fundraise, and fundraising works on 2 levels. Not only are we actually directing funds to organisations that need it, we're also raising awareness about high impact charities and about effectiveness. And I think that's a really powerful benefit of fundraising. 2, you can share your journey. So if you're actually giving effectively, I think speaking about it to those that are around you can be really, really important. We know that at Giving What We Can, many of our pledges come through personal referrals, come through one-on-one conversations with people in their life about their personal giving. I really can't oversell how important it is to talk to people about giving. And I think that public nature of Giving What We Can and the pledge is really important here. The more conversations that we have can really trigger and inspire others to join us to do something. We can also introduce others to create impactful connections. A lot of what we're doing here this weekend is connecting one-on-one with people who might have similar interests or might be interested in something that we want to learn more about, but we can also do this more broadly in our lives. We might know a really great charity that works on animal welfare that we can introduce to a friend that really cares about animals. Or we might know a great charity that's looking for funding in the mental health space that we could share with a friend that's really interested in mental health. Making these kind of connections or introducing people can also be a great way to get the conversation started. And we can also extend invitations to others to come to events or to meetups. I managed to get 2 of my friends to come along to the conference this weekend, which I think is really great. But I think really including people in the conversation is a great way to get people along and getting them to start to take action. And then specifically within the effective altruism community, there are a couple of things that I think we can do. One is to challenge any claims or narratives about a funding overhang. I think that it's pretty clear, and if you ask a lot of people running organizations, that they are facing like pretty clear funding gaps, and that there really is a key need for money, and that this narrative that there is a funding overhang or that there aren't funding gaps is just demonstrably false across animal welfare, global health, pandemic prevention, and even AI safety. So the more that we can challenge any unhelpful narratives about funding, I think that's really, really important. And the second thing is to welcome all types of engagement. I think that the strongest community that we can build, the one that gets the most funding and gets the most done, is one where we can have all types of people engaging in our community. A healthy community has people involved to varying degrees and in different ways. We all have a shared goal of improving the world effectively, and seeing that people were leaving or not engaging in the community because our focus was too narrow or we were asking too much of people, it is really a shame, because these people could have been really strong advocates, could be contributing to funding. And I think that we need to really celebrate all forms of engagement, including those who just want to contribute to the community through giving. And then more broadly, we can advocate for effective giving in a variety of ways. And one of the ways that I think that was really good that we did this earlier this year, and Greg Sadler, who spoke last night, spoke a little bit about this, was advocating for change to our legislation around what counts as a charity, a tax-deductible charity in Australia. There are so many ways that we can be involved and make a difference for effective giving that extend beyond our personal impact. And the last thing is that really we can be doing so many other things. So we could be writing into our favorite podcast hosts, or we could be telling other people about this kind of new movement in philanthropy to focus on impact. We can also be dispelling myths that charity doesn't work, or that it's ineffective, or that we should just give up on trying, because I often hear this, and I think all of us can agree that this is just not true. Together, I really think that we can make a meaningful impact towards closing funding gaps and ensuring that the principles of effective altruism can achieve their potential in the real world. But beyond all of that, promoting effective giving is like more than just the funding we can direct to it. Effective giving is a really, really positive norm that I think is worth spreading. It helps us promote the core principles of effective altruism, like impartiality, altruism, and open-mindedness. It promotes taking positive action on major global problems, combating the reaction to do nothing when problems seem overwhelming. This is something I'm seeing more and more in Gen Z, where they're feeling so anxious about climate, they're feeling overwhelmed by everything that it stops them from taking any action. I really think that effective giving as a norm helps us move past that to see ourselves as a participant in the solution rather than being a victim to something we have no influence over. And it helps us remain connected to doing tangible good in the world. And to help you on your journey to promote effective giving, Giving What We Can has lots of ways for you to engage with giving. We host a donation platform, but in Australia, tax-deductible options are through Effective Altruism Australia or the Life You Can Save. Giving What We Can also has fundraising pages. We have a guide to talking about effective altruism with your friends, family, colleagues, and everyone else. We also have a variety of event guides, and let's just replace that with Melbourne and Sydney. You will see a variety of posters I've put up around the conference with QR codes for you to sign up to mailing lists for Giving What We Can groups in both Melbourne and Sydney. Luke and I are running these Giving What We Can groups in Melbourne and Sydney, and we're looking for co-organisers. So if you'd be interested in helping to support the growth of effective giving, please reach out to me. I would love to talk to you about it. So those are all the things that you can do, but just before I close, I wanted to talk about the vision for the future a little bit. There are significant global challenges that we face that are causing or have the potential to cause significant suffering. Billions of dollars can be very quickly absorbed to make significant progress on some of these major problems, and we'd only just be getting started. The focus areas of effective altruism are the patients at the top of the list in the emergency room, but we must not forget that there are millions of others waiting. In my view, we should be advocating for much more funding to treat more and more patients so that we can work through the backlog and get everyone the help that they deserve. We should be trying to generate more funding until the health and happiness of every last being is secure. And that's why effective giving is really such a critical part of the future of effective altruism. it unlocks the ability for us to work down the triage list and multiply the positive impact that we're able to have. And each of us in this room has the ability to help us move collectively further towards that world. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Grace. I'm going to invite Luke up to stage 2 for a quick Q&A. So please keep the questions coming in. For those who don't know him, Luke Freeman manages Giving What We Can, a global community we just heard quite a lot about. They're dedicated to giving effectively and significantly. It's best known for their over 8,000 members who've pledged to give 10% of their lifetime income to the most effective charities. He is also an active volunteer with various social impact-focused projects, has a background in marketing with a focus on growing early-stage technology startups, and holds degrees and diplomas in media and communications from Macquarie University and Simon Fraser University. Luke himself is personally committed to giving effectively and significantly, and is a proud member of both Giving What We Can and Climate Pledge. Thanks for joining us, Luke. Yeah. Cool. First up, do you guys have any sense of data that suggests how demonstrated the all-in message of EA was, or is it more an anecdotal sense of talking to people in the community? Sorry, can you re-say that question? So is it data on how many people were alienated by all-in messaging? There was a time you were talking about earlier in the talk.
Yeah, I think that we don't have hard data on how many people have bounced away from the community because of some of the stronger messaging. Yeah, this is very much anecdotal. And my sense is that sometimes people's engagement waxes and wanes over time as well. So I'm hoping that with a more inclusive focus, we'll be able to reabsorb some of those people that might have stepped away.
There's also a collection sampling problem of the data that you don't have for the people who don't engage.
And somewhat linked to this, how do you think about some potential trade-offs? Because I get the argument for us trying to be slightly less intense and more welcoming. We also want to maintain a kind of effectiveness and driven approach. Or do you think there is some kind of trade-off there, and how do you think about that?
I think the trade-offs are often overstated. I think that being in an environment where people are kind of enabled to find the amount of commitment and involvement that suits them, and they're always encouraged and inspired to go further, is a lot more likely to actually result in impact than people feeling like there's a really high standard and they're going to meet and why bother trying. I certainly found that myself and had that experience with a lot of people of being able to dip your toe in the water and do a little bit of something good and feeling rewarded for that and feeling excited by that is a lot more likely to keep you going than being told you're not doing enough. And I think many of us have had experiences with people in our lives who might have really high standards, and it makes it really hard to actually want to do the thing that they might be doing.
Yeah, I agree.
Does that mean you also don't agree with, there's sort of the kind of funding versus talent hang overlap thing, and you guys don't like that framing. What I think about direct work versus earning to give, do you think those kind of frames will find?
I think it can be attention to specific individuals in specific contexts. So if you are someone who maybe has a strong work background, and you're considering do I continue working in finance or do AS safety direct work or something like that, is a really serious trade-off for that specific person. Even then, what are the specific opportunities they're able to right then? Are they able to get a job in that? And I would, hands down, if someone has a really strong direct work opportunity that they think will be more impactful than the difference they'll make in earning, take that opportunity. But telling people the message around funding is not needed because there is talent constraints really diminishes the giving that person might do if they didn't take that opportunity. Or the giving they might continue to do once they still have a pretty high-paying job as an AI researcher.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And one thing I wanted to add was one of the things that I think is really valuable about giving is that it doesn't require that someone is earning to give, right? Like you don't have to give most of your salary or half of your salary. You can really just do this at any stage of your life that makes sense for you at whatever level makes sense. And I think while there can be some tension between earning to give or a high impact career, if that's your focus, is like how you're using your time. I really think that giving can be applicable to many, many more people, and therefore it should always be part of the messaging if we want to reach a lot of people through the effective altruism community.
Yeah, to build on that, personal giving isn't just the money, the impact of the money itself, it's often a form of advocacy as well. And also things like fundraising. So like the fact that you are giving and inviting others to join you in that, I've seen that translate into major donors coming in because someone has started a fundraiser or something like that. Someone who might be giving much, much less than the people who then put that opportunity in front of them.
Do you still think 10% is a useful kind of demarcation line?
I think it's a useful point of being significant enough that it is meaningful and that it is actually quite impactful for a lot of people. So like someone earning a median income in Australia, giving 10% of their income, would actually be considered a major donor for many charities. And that is quite impactful. But it's not so high that many people would take a job that paid 10% less if it was more meaningful.
How does Giving What We Can connect with or approach, if you do, other organisations in this space? So like One for the World, is there a kind of collaborative spirit there, or do you guys think of yourselves as some independent orgs?
So I can actually speak directly to One for the World. We will be working directly with One for the World on these new groups that we're launching. So we've entered into a partnership where they're actually going to support with some of their staff time these groups that we're organising. Giving What We Can takes an extremely collaborative approach to the way that we work with other organisations. We definitely see ourselves as supporting and encouraging the whole effective giving ecosystem across the world. And this year we actually hired someone into a role which has the longest title ever of Global Effective Giving Coordinator and Incubator. Which is extremely hard to say, but their role is specifically to look for coordination opportunities within all of the organisations globally, as well as starting to incubate new projects. So this is a really big focus for Giving What We Can.
Yeah, we're also quite excited to work with high-impact athletes. We'll be launching their funds in our platform, so that we can run fundraisers for them, so they can donate to them in multiple countries. We provide donation infrastructure for Giving Green. We really like Founders Pledge, for example, many of them, one of the ways that many donors who aren't members of Founders Pledge can donate their funds through our platform. So we're really keen to try and grow effective giving, regardless of whether it's under our grant or platform or pledges or anything like that.
Cool. Do you have any idea of how the growth of pledges to Giving What We Can has compared with the growth of the community? If one's out to the other, and do you know why?
So there was a dip between 2017 and 2020 when the growth of the EA community outstripped Giving What We Can pledge growth, when giving was significantly less focused on, and Giving What We Can had no one working on it full time. That trend has changed, and I think it's been reasonably similar over the last few years.
What has you found to be the most effective tool in increasing pledges? Do you have a sense of that? Or rules?
Yeah, so I think I touched on this briefly in the talk. So advocacy is one of the most powerful tools for reaching new people. So both on like a one-to-one, like personal basis, like speaking to your friends and family, we get a lot of referrals that way. But also we've had some success with high-profile people advocating for effective giving and for the Giving What We Can pledge, which has resulted in a lot of pledges for us. So I think advocacy and really talking about giving, regardless of who you are. I mean, if you can reach more people, that's great. But if you could just reach your like friends and neighbours, that's also really impactful.
Yeah, like we're asking for pretty significant behaviour change. So you don't catch someone on only a 3-second social media feed scroll. But having someone in your life who you look up to and you respect, seeing them have a behaviour of making giving an important part of their life, whether it's a lecturer or a friend or a podcast you listen to or something like that, seeing that behaviour modeled is something that is very impactful, and seeing opportunities, as you mentioned before, people feeling like there's nothing they can do on problems that they care about, and then having someone go, oh, actually, there's this great organisation that does this, and here's how you can fund it. And I support that myself, and here's the outcomes that it's had. That's incredibly powerful, because someone is frustrated with the world as it is, and you've given them a solution.
Yeah, awesome. I know a lot of people struggle a bit with this idea of talking about personal giving, because there's a lot of cultures that talk all these different kind of issues, and I think you mentioned you have a guide for this. Briefly, do you have any thoughts about how to approach these kinds of conversations?
Yeah, I think that often one approach that works really well is to talk about, rather than like asking someone directly about like, hey, do you give, like, you know, basically you're like, tell me if you're a good person, right? Like we generally approaching a conversation like that is pretty hard. The way that I usually frame these things is to talk about what I'm really passionate about, how I decided to give, like looking for ways that someone might empathize or have similar feelings to me about a particular topic to see if they're interested before I like go into a bit more. So if I can identify like, oh, you're also vegan, or oh, you have an interest in doing good, like, yeah, this is how I do that. I was always looking to have an impact, but I never knew how, and then I came across this thing and it's really helped me feel like I'm contributing to the world. I think people can really empathize with our personal stories and find it much less confronting, because it doesn't feel like an ask or like a direct kind of like attack on them, which sometimes it can feel like when we're talking about doing good. Luke's probably going to explain this much more eloquently than me.
That's great. I honestly think like step one, stop feeling ashamed. Like, you don't feel ashamed about enjoying watching The Good Place and telling your friends about this thing that you really like, and you don't feel ashamed about a book that you really enjoy. You don't feel ashamed about the fact that you started back at the gym finally, and the fact that people almost feel ashamed about the good that they're doing by giving like a meaningful amount of their income to things that are highly impactful. Like, that's a really weird psychological thing that's going on. So like, to start with, like, oh, I was what did you get up to this week? Oh, I went to an event where we were talking about, philanthropy. And it was really fascinating to hear how these things, like, that we thought worked, that they didn't. Or, we were talking about, mortgage rates have gone up. Yeah, like, it's been difficult thinking about how I prioritize my donations. Like, there are all of these things that, as an authentic human being, if giving is a part of your life and something you think about, there are these opportunities where it is actually relevant and topical to talk about. It's like, I've been really frustrated with the government's policy on this issue. I found this organisation that I've started supporting. Like, there are so many opportunities where it is actually just incredibly authentic and real, and it's not preachy, it is just you.
Thanks. There are a couple of questions here about funding gaps. So, firstly, like, how important do you think of funding gaps are when you think about what to prioritise versus doing some kind of cost effectiveness estimate? And also, what are some kind of things we can look for to like work out where funding gaps exist in the individual?
So if you have like a reasonable amount to give, like there are a lot of people who now, anyone who wants any conversation to have this really depends a lot on your values and what you're trying to change in the world through giving. So it does vary a lot by funding area. One like easy option for a lot of people is if you have like a particular worldview, you're trying to pursue the lives of helping people now, or you're trying to improve the lives of animals, you can generally find a fund which will do a lot of that work for you. So for donors who are giving like a smaller amount and who want to like outsource that thinking, things like GiveWell's All Grants Fund or Effective Altruism Australia if you choose the like partner charity of choice, EA funds, the Long-Termism Fund, Animal Welfare Fund, things like that. they can do a lot of that work for you. If you have more money, there are things like funding circles, charity entrepreneurship is starting a few in the meta space, in the mental health space. There are a few others coming up as well. And very large donors, I would recommend considering starting a foundation because you can actually get staff focused on funding a particular area. But yeah, funds are a really good way of like just outsourcing the grant making work. But you can also dig deep into specific charities as well. We have a lot of information on our website, depending on the kind of focus area that you want.
Yeah, and I would say that most charities will at some point in the year like publish if they have a funding gap or how much money that they're looking for to fund the certain programs that they're running. So if you already have reason to believe that like this charity should be fully funded, you think that like their work is really high quality because you're trusting GiveWell or someone else, and they've said that they have a funding gap, yeah, usually they'll be pretty clear about asking for money if they need it. So I think that usually you can find this information if you already have an idea of what you want to do.
Yeah, the other just like hot tip is look for things that like there's some reason why other people aren't funding it that you think is bad. For example, it might be it's unsexy. For example, giving what we can ourselves, we don't like to ask people for own operational funding. It's the case of a lot of organisations. So like me myself, before I was working in the space, I was funding a lot of stuff that was, and I still am myself with my donations, like predominantly meta stuff, because like I see it as a leveraged opportunity. But other people really like the 100% for charity messaging, so you're enabling that. So finding things that other people don't want to fund or you disagree with the funder might be that they have a particular constraint, they can't grant to a particular country for some reason. So for example, I know getting funds into India or China can sometimes be difficult. So if you are based in one of these countries, you could ask grant makers, are there grants that you didn't make because it was difficult to actually get money from the US into India or something like that.
There's a follow-up question on personal giving and its relationship to social media. You mentioned the 3-second scroll. Do you think there is space for social media engagement on personal giving issues?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that giving what we can, running kind of like faceless ads or something that like just say like giving is a good thing, you should do it, are not the world's most effective thing. I think that if someone published a video of themselves on social media talking about their giving to their friends and family or even to the wider public, I think that's potentially really impactful. It's really helpful to see that there are real people doing this. I think that hearing from people in the community about giving was really important for me to take a pledge. We hear this all the time that like the member stories that we have up on our YouTube channel were like influential for people to take a pledge. Like sharing your story is really, really important because people just want to know that they're not alone in making a big decision. So I think the more that we can advocate and share our stories, even if it's on social media, I think makes a really big difference. And the more voices that we can have out there help us change this norm and help us feel less alone in taking a significant decision.
Yeah, for years after doing a couple of fundraisers, where one was a cycle that I did, one was where I was living on less than $2 a day for food for a month. Like years after that, friends and family who had given, or even just seeing me posting about it, like for years later coming back, they just remembered I was the guy who cared about charity effectiveness, and they're like, oh, you're coming to some inheritance, or like, oh, I finally reached the target income that I was going to. Now I'm really thinking about it. Or like, I saw this documentary and I was really, struck by this. How could I help? And I remember you were the guy who was talking about that and they connect.
Yeah, sometimes we see people pledge and they've written oh yeah, a friend mentioned this to me back in 2015, and now I pledged 8 years later. So sometimes the delay here is quite long and there might not be an immediate feedback loop, but advocacy really does work.
On the flip side of that, do you have any thoughts about how people can maintain their giving and what main factors predict a consistent giving versus dropping off?
Yeah, so I think making it sustainable is really important. So we generally encourage people to make a commitment at a level where they think that they can sustain it. So I personally took a trial pledge before taking a full pledge because I wasn't sure how it would feel to give 10%. So previously, before I took any pledge, I was giving like 1 to 2% of my income away. And I thought that was pretty good because most of my friends weren't giving anything, and I was like, yeah, let me go. And then I decided to pledge 3% to see how it felt. And then I decided, okay, I can really do this. Like, I feel confident. I've done my little budget calculations. It took me like a year to think about this. And then I decided I could really do this, and I could give 10%. So I think taking the time to really think it through, taking a trial pledge, it is quite a good idea. And also like thinking about how you might sustain this if you didn't have an income for a bit, or what that might look like if you took a lower paying job and how you might sustain that kind of commitment, I think is important to think about. It's definitely a big decision, but it's worth thinking through.
Yeah, keep it up for the long term. It's like, you can find it somewhere online. I think that Hayden Wilkinson had a good talk in like, which basically looked at giving less, in the short term, so you give more in the long term, in terms of like, if you were like given an extreme level for a couple of years and then give up if the probability was higher, versus giving it a lower sustainable amount if you like to keep on it longer. It kind of does the whole math on that. But the long and short of it is sustainability is really important in giving, and this is also why we often think about, even thinking of account pledge, a lot of people think it's a yearly thing. And while we do recommend giving on a regular basis, it's like a lifetime income thing, like over the course of your life. And I've had up and down. I had to start, I was earning very, very little, and knowing that I was about to do that, I gave more for a while, then I gave less, and then since I went back up again, and I'm like, I'm in it for the long game.
So, what do you think about the conversations or the analysis of giving now as a way on the kind of impact level of like picking your time? Do you think that's valuable?
Yeah, I would say at the moment though, by most views, we're understanding the capital that we have. So if you look at the implementation from a perspective, you're like, oh, yeah, optimal well, assuming you're saving for some exceptional catastrophe, you might be able to inject money even at that. By most views, we're actually understanding. So if you think about what people have access to, the numbers of income, foundation, wealth, all of the like available capital, it's understanding the rate of spend is lower than it should be. So more money needs to be coming out the door.
Somewhat better question here about doing what we can. I just might read it verbatim. Taking a impact and learning perspective, how is doing what we can be more broadly thinking about impact analysis, intended and unintended, positive and negative, and integrating continuous learning and changing direction of funding decisions, prioritizations, making it a wrong turn?
That's a really long question.
So that's probably a question more for our research team. So very research, giving what we can to the board. If you want to email that question. Long and short of it, find Michael who's at the conference.
He would love to talk to you.
But
he didn't attend the session.
Yeah. Our main research agenda at the moment is actually giving what we can ourselves to not do primary research on charities. We're evaluating evaluators, so organisations like GiveWell, Founders Pledge, Longview, people who do grant making and charity evaluation. Our research agenda is looking at their work and seeing, is this work that we think is of high enough quality that we will adopt those recommendations ourselves and pass them on to our members and donors, and then have a donation platform and stuff. We take a pretty well-viewed, diverse view of effective giving, so we're inclusive of many different ways of thinking about whose lives you consider, how you weight different outcomes and timelines and things like that, different types of approaches, hit-based, evidence robust. So like we try to give people the resources to think through this themselves and to point in the direction of those who provide good information.
Is there anything coming down the pipeline for what you can that you're particularly excited about?
Giving What We Can has many exciting projects that we're working on at the moment. One of those is the launch of our new community strategy, including the Melbourne and Sydney Giving What We Can groups, which I mentioned earlier. That's kind of technically not public yet. We're launching them on Wednesday next week. So that's a really exciting project that I've been working on over the last few months, is redoing our new community strategy, which will also include a new online community for people across the world. We're also working on many other exciting projects, which we can't say too much about at the moment, but towards giving season, we will see some exciting launches. We're doing what we can.
Excellent, Lisa. We're fast running out of time, although if anyone has more questions, today at 2 o'clock, so basically in an hour, I think both Fraser and Luke will be at the office hours for the EA community, so go find them there. But was there anything else here that you wanted to mention that we can ask